In this video I'm going to do a couple examples here of showing how to apply the quadratic formula for solving a quadratic equation. In both of these examples we are not going to use a calculator for a decimal approximation. We're going to go ahead and leave it in that radical form and then just simplify the radical or see what happens underneath that radical and deal with it at that case. So in this first example here I've got a 2x squared equals 4x plus 1. Alright, first thing we need to do is we need to make sure that we rewrite this in standard form. Alright, moving everything to the left, and I'm going to choose the left because I do want that leading coefficient to remain positive right there. So when I subtract 4x and I subtract 1 from both sides of the equation, I'm going to have a 2x squared minus a 4x minus a 1 equals 0. So we definitely do want that in standard form. Alright, and then when it's in this form, we can clearly see our a is 2, our b is negative 4, and our c is a negative 1. So from here on out then, it is just a matter of plugging everything into that formula and making sure that you don't make any mistakes. So I have a negative b here, my b is already negative, so a negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared, which will be a negative 4 quantity squared right there, minus 4 times a, which is 2, times a negative 1, which is my c. And then all over 2 times a, which is also a 2. Alright, and I usually do recommend for my students to actually do that first step and just plug things in. Try not to do any math in your head initially. Okay, here, negative times negative is going to give me a positive 4. We'll have the plus or minus. Negative 4 squared is going to give me a 16 underneath there. This will give me a negative 8 plus this negative that's in front, which is really going to be a plus 8 right there. And then it's going to be all over 4 on the bottom. Alright, adding underneath there, 16 and 8 is going to give me a 24. So I'm going to have a 4 plus or minus the square root of 24 all over 4. Okay, now at this point, alright, and depending on what your class is, some might recommend taking a calculator and getting your 2 decimal approximations here. But what we're going to do instead is we're going to take that radical and we're going to simplify it the way we simplify radicals. Alright, so square root of 24, we're going to break it up with a little factor tree, trying to come up with the biggest square root that goes into 24, which is going to be 4. So this is going to be a square root of 4 times the square root of 6, and then we can take that square root of 4, which gives us a 2 square root of 6. Alright, so this generally I do aside away from the work in the quadratic formula because it's not literally part of the quadratic formula, it's part of just the math that's simplifying it. Alright, rewriting there then, I'm going to have 4 plus or minus 2 square root of 6 over 4. Alright, I have a lot of people then that just want to start crossing things off and reducing. Technically, you should not do that at that point. This on the top here is a binomial. Alright, that really is a binomial. So if you want to be able to cross something out with this 4, you need to factor out a greatest common factor. So factoring out a greatest common factor of 2 is going to leave me with a 2 plus or minus the square root of 6 all over the 4. Okay, now I can come in here and say 2 goes into 2 one time, 2 goes into 4 2 times. Okay, and then that would be leaving my final answer as 2 plus or minus square root of 6 all over 2. Alright, and technically this is 2 answers. So if you are using the set notation to denote your answers, then put those set brackets around there and then you've got your answer displayed in set notation. Alright, now for the second example over here, again, not in standard form, so I'm going to need to move that negative 4x to the left-hand side. Now, we do want it in that standard form, so since this needs to be the middle term, I'm going to automatically put it where it needs to be. So I'm going to add 4x to both sides. So I'll have a 3x squared plus a 4x plus a 2 is equal to 0. Alright, at this point then, I can see that my a is 3, my b is 4, and my c is 2. So again, going straight to that formula and plugging things in, a negative b is going to give me a negative 4. Alright, plus or minus the square root of square b, alright, which is going to be 4 squared, and then minus 4 times a, which is a 3, and then times c, which is 2. And then all over 2 times my a value, which is 3. Alright, now going through and doing a little bit of arithmetic here. Negative 4 will stay on top there, plus or minus. This is going to give me a 16. Alright, and then 4 times 3 is 12, times 2 is 24, so then I'll have a minus 24 underneath that radical, and a 6 on the bottom. Alright, now on this one, what we see is when we subtract 16 minus 24, we're going to get a negative 8 right there. So then I'm going to have a negative 4 plus or minus the square root of a negative 8 over 6. Alright, now it really depends on how you're working with this. Obviously this is not going to be a real number, so you could simplify this and put it in terms of I. Okay, so just like over here I pulled out the square root of 24, I'm going to do that as well, and we're going to work on simplifying that. Okay, so we'll take this and we'll come over here and we'll do the square root of a negative 8. Okay, hopefully you remember that a negative 1 under there. If I rewrote this as a negative 1 times the square root of 8, alright, breaking that up like that, then that's where that I comes from. So right here on this square root of negative 1, there's my I. Alright, now breaking up the 8, alright, square root of 4 times square root of 2, which makes then this final answer, square root of 4 being 2 right there, so it's going to be a 2i square root of 2. Alright, so again, I do that outside of my work from my quadratic formula work. Okay, so rewriting here, then we'll have a negative 4 plus or minus the new answer that we have here for that square root of negative 8, which is a 2i square root of 2 all over 6. And again, you don't want to just start crossing things out, because technically, legally, that's not how you should be doing this. This is a binomial on the top. Alright, so take a look at that binomial on the top and see if you can factor something out. Alright, in this case, I can factor out a 2. Alright, so if I pull a 2 out, that's going to leave me with a negative 2 there, and then the plus or minus, and then an I square root of 2, and then all over a 6. Okay, so now, legally, now I can cross things out. 2 goes into 2 one time, 2 goes into 6 3 times. Alright, so that's going to leave me as a final answer of negative 2 plus or minus I square root of 2 all over 3. Alright, but you could leave it in that form if you wanted. You could also put it into a plus bi form. You could separate this into that a plus bi form, which is something with your complex numbers. There's nothing wrong with leaving an answer like that. But if you did separate it, let's write that down into like your a plus bi form of a number. Alright, I'm going to then pull out the negative 2/3. I'll have the plus or minus, and then sometimes I put that I on the right hand side. I do square root of 2 over 3 and then I, so that's really in, here's your a part, and then here's your b, and then your I. So I've also seen it written that way as well. So 2 real quick examples here, just practicing with that quadratic formula and seeing the different ways that you can work them out, either with calculator or without a calculator, is the way I've decided to do these 2 problems, and sometimes you will run into those imaginary numbers. Definitely thanks for watching. If the videos are helping, please share with your friends so they can benefit too, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Thanks.